Hello, my name is M.W.Burnette. I am a home studio music producer, songwriter, and recording artist, and this is my video diary. I haven't been doing a lot of writing or recording or anything like that in the past few weeks because I've been working on trying to understand sort of what this means to me. Um, I'm afraid that this diary entry might be kind of scattershot because I'm still kind of working this out in my own head and trying to understand things. So I'll try to tell you kind of what the dilemma is, so to speak. I'm trying to set goals for myself for the rest of the year, but in order to do that, I need to know what it is I'm trying to accomplish by making music. Is it just to entertain myself, to give myself something to do, or is there a higher purpose to that? Am I trying to share this with other people, make an impact on other people's lives? And if I am, then how does that affect what I do from day to day? So I'm trying to kind of work through all of those things and figure out how to measure my progress. As a musician, you need to be able to define success for yourself, and a lot of times it's very tempting to allow other people's definition of success shape the way that you value yourself. Uh, I might be wrong about this, but I perceive that a lot of people view musicians um, in kind of a binary sort of way. It's a black and white kind of way. It's either you're super successful, megastar, Grammy winning, gold records, that sort of thing, or you're just a wannabe. And that's it. It's those two extremes. There's nothing in between that. That's not true. It there are a lot of musicians who make a living making music that you've never heard of and will never hear of because that's just not the track that they're on, but they're able to make a living doing that. But even that is it just those three options there? If you're not able to make a living making music, does that mean that you're a failure at it? Jump cut. Had a little interruption there, but so anyway, I think what I was talking about was when you're a musician or an artist, that kind of thing. It's easy to let other people's perceptions shape the way that you view yourself. And looking at myself, I don't have a lot in the way of kind of these typical metrics that people would use to evaluate an artist. Like I don't have lots of YouTube video views or a lot of streams on Spotify, or I'm not selling lots of albums and merchandise and all that kind of stuff. So does that mean that everything that I'm doing is just a waste, that I'm just a wannabe? I don't know, but I kind of feel like that sometimes, and it's hard to stay motivated to keep doing this, because this really does take a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of skill, and to look at all of that and say, all I'm doing is just throwing that energy away. Maybe I could spend my time doing something more productive. But thinking about it and then trying to understand, how this has a value. There are a few things that have come into my mind and I've been mulling over, and I want to share those with you. I was listening to Pandora or Spotify or whatever the other day, and a song by Paula Cole came up in the feed, and I remembered that song from the '90s, and it just got me questioning. At that time, that song was huge, but you haven't heard anything, much from Paula Cole since then. So I was just curious, what's she up to now? And I looked her up, and so she's released several albums since the '90s, and essentially she's essentially an independent artist now. She has her own music label and records and releases albums on her own label that way. Um, but she hasn't had like a top 100 hit since then. Uh, you don't. She's not played the Super Bowl halftime show or any of those kind of things like that. So does that mean that everything that she's done since the 90s has just been wasted effort? I don't think so. See, I would look at her and I would say, that's a person, that's a successful musician. Even though I haven't heard anything from her since then, she's won a Grammy. That's something significant. But does that mean that everything that she's done since then has been a waste of her time because she hasn't repeated that success? See, I don't think so. And I don't think, and so, thinking about myself, if I was in that situation, it's like, say that I won a Grammy, but then never did that again. I 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, all of that time in between, wouldn't that be wasted? It's like, is that your definition of success? Is that you have to keep winning Grammys? You have to keep, recording and selling, gold albums, that kind of thing? That's an unfair level of success to hold yourself to. And I think about it in terms of, okay, well, this is what Paula Cole does on a daily basis. She writes songs, she records songs, and she shares them with people. That's the same thing that I'm doing. So as I'm thinking about that, what occurs to me is that I have to be able to find some value in what I'm doing with the gifts that God has given me, that's not contingent upon other people's reception of it. So that's one. Another one. There are two people that I was thinking of from my childhood who had an impact on my life. One of those people was a man whose name was, I believe, Looney Pangle. He was an elderly gentleman. I don't ever remember seeing him not in a wheelchair. But the way that I knew him is he would visit church services. I grew up as a Southern Baptist, and basically once a year we would have what we called revival, which is a week of nightly church services meant to kind of revive our spirituality and our commitment to our faith, that sort of thing. And Looney Pangle would come around to those revivals, and they'd wheel him up. He was in a wheelchair, so he'd go up to the front of the the word has just escaped my mind, the worship hall, whatever. Sanctuary. There we go. Up to the front of the sanctuary, and he would just sing hymns a cappella, and it was very moving. And I think about him, he never recorded an album. He was never on the radio or anything like that. All he did was didn't have a band or anything. He had no accompaniment. He just sat in his wheelchair and sang songs. And he's a person that I respect. Like, I look at what he did and see that had merit. That had value. It affected me. So all of these metrics that I might try to impose upon myself and maybe beat myself up because I'm not achieving those things, I can look at his example and say he never achieved those things either, but what he did do was have an effect on my life, and that mattered. So thinking about him, and then there was another person that I knew whose name actually happened to be Chuck Norris, but he was the first person that I met who was really a good, skillful guitarist, and again, not someone who ever recorded a gold album. I suspect that he's still alive and still playing his guitar, because he was only about maybe 10, 15 years older than me. But never recorded an album. I suspect that he doesn't even have songs on Spotify. But again, what he did was play his guitar, and that had an impact on me. I still remember him. He means something to me. In some ways, the fact that I do this at all is in some way because of what he did. So that had value, and I have to look at those things and recognize those things that those people have done have value, and it's not contingent upon them, racking up loads and loads and loads and loads of fans and selling thousands of records and hundreds of thousands of records and so on. So it's not fair for me to hold myself to that same kind of standard, but to recognize that I can do other things, and those other things will have value and can make an impact on other people's lives. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I haven't figured out, how to measure that, how to gauge my success or whatever, but I feel like I'm at least getting a little bit better picture of the target that I'm shooting at, if that makes sense. So, but anyway, and the other point that I wanted to make in all of this is, even though I haven't necessarily figured this out yet, I hope that what I'm saying here will impact you in this way, that you can recognize maybe a bit of yourself in this conversation and recognize that you have talents. God has gifted you. He's made you unique. And even though the things that you do might not win you acclaim, you might not achieve success in those kind of monetary terms, or in terms of fame and fortune and those types of things, or influence, any of that. You might not achieve that, but that doesn't mean that your talents are wasted. I've done a couple of these diary entries talking about the idea of surrender, and this was one of my main points, is that when you're talking about surrender in terms of your faith, I think it's about surrendering the results of your action. You have to take action, even knowing that it might not accomplish anything. It might be wasted, but you have to take the action anyway, because if you do nothing, there's no possibility that it can have any impact, that it can do any good in the world. So you have to try at least, and then leave the results in God's hands. Surrender those results to Him. And so, anyway, that's what I'm trying to do with to put the skills that I have, such as they are, into serving God and trying to honor Him with my talents, and to encourage you to try to do the same thing. So I know this is kind of run on a little while. This is a little bit longer than usual, and it's kind of all over the place. But anyway, I hope that this is useful to you in some way, and I'll see you next time. Stay groovy.